The rooftop had 350 guests, a view of Biscayne Bay that looked like a stolen painting, and one seat, center front, with a small white card resting on a single white orchid. Reina. Sterling Paige had placed it there himself. Walked to that chair before a single guest arrived, set the card down with 2 fingers, and smiled the smile of a man completely certain the game was already over. He wasn't being generous. He wasn't extending an olive branch. He was constructing a stage. He wanted her to sit in that chair, in whatever she could afford, and watch him marry a woman who came with a last name worth something. He wanted her to understand with her own eyes, surrounded by 350 witnesses, exactly what she had walked away from, exactly what she would never have again. That was the plan. Sterling Paige was very good at plans. But then the elevator doors at the far end of the rooftop foyer slid open, and the plan stopped breathing. 2 men stepped out first, both in black, both standing with the specific stillness of men who don't need to move to be threatening. Then a hand reached through and she stepped out. Reina Boateng. Emerald gown floor length. Gold thread at the collar. She had sewn herself at 1 in the morning because she needed something on her body made by her own hands. Heels that made no apology for the sound they made on marble. Head up. And the man beside her, Korean immaculate, with the quiet authority of someone who has never once needed the room's permission, rested one hand at the small of her back like she was something he had already decided to protect. The room didn't know his name yet, but the room felt him. Sterling Webb, standing at the altar 60 feet away, saw her, and something behind his eyes went very, very still. Before I tell you what happened next, you need to understand what this woman survived to stand there. What happened next was unbelievable. If you love a story about a woman who refused to stay down, hit that like button right now and subscribe so you don't miss a single chapter. Because what Sterling did and what Reina did about it, nothing about it is what you think. Reina Boateng's alarm went off at 4:47 every morning. Not 4:45. Not 5 o'clock. 4:47 because that was the exact minute she had calculated gave her enough time to have the first tray of macarons cooling before Noah woke up asking for cereal and an explanation of something impossible, like why clouds didn't fall. In Miami in September, 4:47 in the morning is the one window when the heat hasn't fully committed to the day. That window, brief, fragile, was hers alone. She lived in a 2-bedroom apartment in Overtown, one of Miami's oldest neighborhoods. A community that had been called the Harlem of the South, then partially demolished for an expressway no one consulted its residents about, and was now slowly, defiantly, pulling itself back together 1 block at a time. Reina felt something close to kinship with it. Her apartment smelled of brown butter and vanilla by 5:30. She worked with the focused quiet of a woman who had been doing this since she was 9, standing beside her grandmother in a kitchen that smelled exactly like this one. Her grandmother had said dessert was not an afterthought. It was the last note of the meal, the one that lingered, the one person carried home without realizing. Reina had built a business on that belief. Barely. Custom dessert tables, celebration cakes, macaron towers for events that could afford them. She had regulars, referrals, a waiting list that felt more like a dare. She also had ingredient invoices that found her awake at 2 in the morning doing quiet, anxious math under the covers. It was on a Thursday in late September, while Noah sat at the kitchen table delivering a detailed theory about dinosaur dreams, that she saw the envelope, sitting between an electricity bill and a school flyer. White, thick, the kind of stationery that announces its own importance before you've touched it. She recognized the embossed crest on the back immediately. The Paige family seal, small and gold and precisely pretentious. She set down her coffee. She opened it. You are cordially invited to the wedding of Sterling Darnell Paige and Cecily Hargrove. Saturday, the 14th of October. The Kimpton Epic Hotel, Miami. Rooftop terrace. Black tie. And at the bottom, in Sterling's precise, deliberate handwriting, the same controlled script he had used to sign divorce papers with a barely visible smirk. Front row. Your name is on the card. I saved it personally. Come see what a real wife looks like, Reina. She read it once. Then again. Then a third time very slowly, the way you reread something to confirm it is as calculated as it first appeared. She did not cry. She did not break anything. She folded the invitation and placed it face down on the counter. Mama. Noah was watching her from across the table, spoon suspended midair. Why is your face doing that thing? What thing? The quiet thing. The thinking thing. She picked up her coffee. Eat your breakfast, baby. But it was not nothing. It was Sterling Paige's final move in a game he had been running for years. What he did not know, what he could not have possibly imagined, was that the board was about to change entirely. And the person about to change it was someone he had spent 4 years convincing himself didn't exist. To understand what that invitation unlocked in Reina, you have to understand what Sterling Paige actually was. He was not a monster when she met him. That was the thing about men like Sterling, they never were, not at first. Monsters were recognizable. You saw them and you ran. Sterling was something far more deliberate. He was specifically charming. The kind of man who remembered the exact detail you had mentioned once in passing and surfaced it 3 weeks later. As if you were the most fascinating person he had ever been near. As if you were the only one. She met him at a charity gala in Wynwood on a warm Friday night in October. One of those Miami events where art and money occupied the same rooms and pretended they had always understood each other. Reina had been there as a vendor. Her business was 7 months old. She was terrified and performing a confidence she hadn't fully earned yet, and Sterling Paige had appeared beside her dessert table, picked up one small pastry, tasted it and said, quietly, without the performance people usually wrap around a compliment, "This is remarkable." He stayed at her table for 40 minutes. He was still there when she started packing up. "Can I help you carry something?" he asked. She should have said no. She said yes. They dated 6 months. He was attentive. Consistent. He showed up. He met Noah had been 4, and brought him a building set that occupied him for 2 weeks straight. He told Reina one night in his car outside her building, "You don't have to do all of this alone." And she, who had been doing all of it alone for so long that alone had started to feel like a personality trait rather than a condition, allowed herself to believe him. They married in a small chapel in Coral Gables. 30 guests. He promised a proper celebration once his major case was resolved. The celebration never came. What came was his real face. It arrived gradually. The way water damage appears. A faint discoloration first. Something you tell yourself is nothing. Then one morning the ceiling collapses. It began with observations. That presentation on the cake was uneven, Reina. The Moorfield people expect a certain level. Then a correction. "You spent how much on that vanilla? We have a budget." Then something quieter. The slow, systematic removal of everything she had built before him. He convinced her to pause taking orders. To be his wife. His presence at firm dinners. His hostess. He consolidated their finances into a single account where his name held the decisions. He introduced her at partner events as "my wife," in a tone that communicated she was decorative, and he was gracious for including her. 3 years in, on a Tuesday when Noah was asleep and Sterling was at a dinner that did not exist, she found the messages. Not one conversation. Not a single lapse. A timeline that reached back to before their first anniversary, documented with the casual indifference of a man who had never seriously considered the possibility of being caught. She confronted him that night. He looked at her with the calm of someone who had quietly rehearsed this. "And what exactly are you going to do?" He picked up his phone. "Set it down. You have no business. No income. No savings. You stepped out of the market 3 years ago. Your name means nothing in this city without mine." He paused. "So tell me, Reina, where exactly are you going?" He wasn't asking. He was informed. For 3 terrible minutes, 3 minutes she would think about for a long time afterward, she believed every word of it. But only for 3 minutes. Because what Reina Boateng did next had nothing to do with Sterling Paige's version of her future. She didn't leave that night. She left 6 weeks later. 6 weeks of watching, planning, and performing the role of a wife so convincingly that Sterling never once suspected she had already departed the marriage from the inside. In those 6 weeks she learned things she never wanted to know about a person she had trusted entirely. She learned the betrayal stretched back further than the messages. She learned he had structured their shared finances with the deliberateness of a man who had always assumed he might need a legal advantage someday. She learned that a man with a law degree and a specific quality of coldness can make a woman believe she is the origin of every problem in a room he built and furnished and handed her the keys to. The night she left, he raised his hand. He was on the phone. She had asked a simple question about a utility bill. He looked at her the way you look at something you have stopped bothering to see, and his hand came up. Flat. Fast. He didn't connect. But it rose. And that motion, that particular motion, cut through every layer of doubt she'd been managing. Every conversation she'd been having with herself about logistics and timing, and where she would go. She looked at his hand. She thought about Noah in the next room. Something very quiet and very final made a decision. She did not speak. She walked to Noah's room, lifted him still sleeping, cheek warm against her shoulder, small hands curled at his chest, and picked up the bag she had packed 19 days earlier and hidden behind the winter coats she never needed in Miami but kept because they were her grandmother's. She walked out the front door without looking back. The drive to her mother's house took 14 minutes. It felt like the distance between two different versions of her life. Reina Boateng opened the door at 1 o'clock in the morning. She looked at Reina's face, the specific composition of a woman who has made an irreversible decision and is only now beginning to feel the weight of it, and stepped back. Said, "Come in." That was it. That was everything. The divorce was a war. Sterling hired 2 attorneys and filed motions designed to exhaust her financially and emotionally before any settlement was reached. He claimed abandonment. He presented documentation demonstrating very cleanly that Reina had no independent income and no established career. He had, with considerable foresight, arranged his finances to appear nearly insolvent. The judge granted her full custody and $275 a month in child support. $275. In Miami. For a 6-year-old. Sterling smiled, leaving the courthouse steps. He leaned close as he passed her and said, "Just for her. Enjoy starting over." That was 18 months ago. And now he wanted her in the front row. What Reina decided to do with that invitation, no one who knew her would have predicted it. If you're feeling this right now, if Reina's strength is hitting something real, drop a comment below. Tell me, would you have gone to that wedding? Because what she decided to do next will surprise you. Make sure you're subscribed because this is where the story completely changes. She sat with the invitation for 4 days. It lived face down on the kitchen counter the way you leave something you haven't finished processing. She baked around it. Took 2 custom orders, stayed up past midnight finishing a mirror-glaze cake for a Betrayal client, and told herself she hadn't decided anything yet. On the 5th morning, Noah picked it up. "Mama, is this a party invitation?" Something like that. He considered it with the full gravity of a 6-year-old delivering a verdict. "Are you going?" "I haven't decided." "You should go." He set it back down and returned to his cereal. "Parties have cake." She laughed. The genuine kind. The kind that arrived without warning and surprised her by existing at all. That same afternoon, she drove to Caldera & Sons on Coral Way, a specialty baking supply shop that imported from France, Japan, and Tahiti, and smelled of roasted cacao and dried citrus and the very specific optimism of people who treated ingredients with intention. She had one item to find: Tahitian vanilla extract from a specific French Polynesian cooperative. Cold-pressed. Pure. Nearly impossible to source in the continental United States. A bride had seen a video about it, and committed to it with the full conviction of a woman who had recently discovered a word she intended to use forever. Caldera had called ahead. 1 case remaining. She moved through the aisles. She found it on the bottom shelf of aisle 7. Reached for it. Her hand closed around the bottle. Another hand was already there. She looked up. The man crouching beside her in the specialty spice aisle was, objectively, the last person she expected to find there. Late 30s. Black suit, cut so precisely it looked architectural rather than sewn. No tie. 1 button open at the collar. A watch that didn't announce itself the way expensive things sometimes do. Dark eyes that moved from the bottle to her face with the focused calm of someone who had decided long ago that reacting quickly was rarely efficient. "I apologize," he said. His voice was low. Accented. Korean. "It's fine." She didn't release the bottle. "I need this for my mother," he said. "She has been searching for this specific extract for 5 weeks. It's promised to a client." He studied her. Not dismissively. With actual attention, the kind that landed differently because it seemed entirely without agenda. "I'll pay you 3 times the store price for yours." She looked at him steadily. It's not about the price. Something fractional shifted in his expression. No, he said quietly. I can see that. She released the bottle. Stood. Tell your mother I hope her baking goes well. She turned to the next shelf, picked up Madagascan extract, second choice technically, but extraordinary if you understood what you were doing with it. He stood as well. They were nearly the same height with her in her sneakers, which was not what she'd expected. You're a professional, he said. Still not a question. Pastry chef. Custom desserts. He reached into the interior pocket of his jacket and produced a business card. Black. Clean. Simple text in both Korean and English. He held it out. Jang Tae-seok. My mother is celebrating her 60th birthday. A private dinner, 40 guests, 9 days from today. My arrangements fell through 3 days ago. Reina looked at the card. Then at him. 9 days. I'm aware. 2 other vendors have probably already told you it's not possible. The faintest outline of a smile. 3 actually. She reached into her jacket and produced her own card. Her name, her number, Reina's in hand-lettered type she had designed herself at 11 o'clock at night, because she refused to let even her business card look like something she hadn't thought about. She held it out. Call me tonight. Tell me the theme, the guest profile, every dietary restriction. And tell your mother. She held up the Madagascan extract. This is what I'd use for my own family. It's better, honestly, for what she's probably making. She picked up her basket and walked away. He stood in aisle 7 with her card in one hand and the Tahitian vanilla in the other. He looked at the card for a long moment, then turned it over, as if checking for something on the back. What Reina had no way of knowing as she walked out of that shop was exactly who she had just handed her number to, and how completely that small white card was about to rearrange the next 30 days of her life. He called at 7:12 that evening, while Noah was asleep and Reina sat at her kitchen island with her planning notebook open and a cup of tea going lukewarm. She expected a list of specifications. What she received was something else entirely. My mother has spent her life watching other people be celebrated, Jang Tae-seok said without preamble. I want this dinner to feel, for one evening, like the world was arranged specifically around her. Not because of the food. Because of what the food communicates. Reina was quiet for a moment. What does she love? Magnolias. Korean pear. The color of the sky exactly 10 minutes before sunrise. That's a very specific answer. She's a very specific woman. Reina opened to a clean page in her notebook. I'll need to meet her first. She met Mrs. Jang the following morning in a suite at the Four Seasons on Betrayal, with floor-to-ceiling glass making Biscayne Bay look like something commissioned exclusively for this room. Mrs. Jang was small and sharp-eyed, dressed in dove-gray cashmere with a jade bracelet that looked older than the building surrounding her. She assessed Reina the way experienced women assess other women, rapid, thorough, and entirely without cruelty. My son says you refused to sell him the vanilla, she said. It was promised to someone else. Something in Mrs. Jang's expression registered approval, quickly folded away. Sit down. Reina sat. I want the table to feel like a memory I haven't had yet, Mrs. Jang said. Something I recognize without being able to explain why. Reina opened her sketchbook. She sketched for 20 minutes without stopping. A dessert installation moving from warm and complex at the outer edge toward floral and delicate at the center, anchored by a sculptural tiered centerpiece designed to suggest magnolia blooms dissolving at first light. Mrs. Jang watched in silence. When Reina turned the book around, there was a pause. When can you start? Mrs. Jang said. She started the next morning. The 9 days that followed had a quality Reina had almost forgotten, the sensation of doing exactly what she was built to do, at the full capacity of what she actually knew. No apologizing for her instincts. No managing someone else's discomfort with her ability. Just the work, and a woman of taste who recognized the difference between almost right and refused to accept the former. Jang Tae-seok appeared briefly each morning, spoke to his mother in Korean, and before leaving always paused briefly in the kitchen doorway. He asked a question each time. Never about the dinner. What made you start? Does your son understand what you're actually building? Why do you work past midnight when you could stop at 9? She answered honestly each time. There was something in the way he listened, entirely, without the particular habit some men have of waiting for their turn rather than actually hearing, that made honesty feel less costly than usual. On the 7th night she was still working at 11. The suite is quiet. Miami pressing itself against the glass 40 stories below. Footsteps. She didn't look up. "Tea," he said. "Please." He set a cup beside her without ceremony, without announcement, and sat across the island. She worked. He reviewed something on his phone quietly. A few minutes passed. "Can I ask you something?" he said. "You ask me something every night. This one is different." She looked up. What Jang Tae-seok said next, and what Reina admitted in return, was something neither of them had planned. And it shifted everything that came after. "You're going to his wedding." Not a question. Her hands stopped. The sugar petal she had been shaping held perfectly still between her fingers. "Your mother told you. She heard you on the phone. She thought you knew she was still awake." No judgment in his voice. None. "You don't have to explain anything. I know." She set the petal down carefully. The skyline outside was a constellation of lit windows, all those separate lives running simultaneously, all those people who had no idea this conversation was happening. "I haven't fully decided." He waited. "My ex-husband," she said after a moment. "He sent me a wedding invitation with a handwritten note at the bottom." She paused. It wasn't kind. He let the sentence exist without filling it. "He designed the invitation the way he designed the marriage," she said. "As a stage. He wants me to come, sit in a chair with my name on it and understand, surrounded by his world, that everything is fine for him. That I was the one who lost. That I am still the one who is losing." She picked up the petal again. Examined it against the light. "Part of me wants to go. Not for revenge. Not to cause a scene." She looked down at the work spread across the island. "I need to walk into that room and feel nothing that he put in me. I need to find out if I'm actually free. And I won't know until I'm standing in the exact place he's most certain I'm not." The kitchen was quiet. 30 stories below, a boat moved across the bay, its lights drawing a slow line through the dark water. "Then don't go alone," Jang Tae-seok said. She looked at him. "There are rooms in this city," he said, choosing each word with visible precision, "where my presence beside a person changes the atmosphere considerably." A pause. "I thought you should know that before you decide anything." Silence opened between them. Full, not empty. "Why would you do that for me?" she asked. His gaze moved across the kitchen island. 8 days of work spread across it. The structural centerpiece that had required 3 complete rebuilds before it was right. The sugar flowers pressed between parchment. The installation sketched on paper tucked under mixing bowls. He looked at all of it the way someone looks at something they genuinely recognize. "Because I know what it looks like when someone is building something real," he said quietly. "And I have spent my entire life making certain that the people who deserve to walk into rooms without needing anyone's permission are able to walk in." He stood, straightened his jacket. "The car leaves at 6 on Saturday. If you want to be in it, be in the lobby." He left without waiting for an answer. She sat with her hands wrapped around the warm mug. She thought about the chair with her name on it. She thought about Sterling's voice on the courthouse steps, "Enjoy starting over," and the certainty in it, the absolute undisturbed certainty. She thought about Noah at breakfast saying parties have cake with the authority of someone who had never once questioned the validity of his own conclusions. She thought about the way Jang Tae-seok listened. Like what she was saying was precisely the thing he had been waiting to hear. She was in the lobby at 5:51. What she didn't know yet, standing there in the lobby in her emerald gown with gold thread at her collar, was exactly who the city of Miami already understood Jang Tae-seok to be, and what it meant that he was standing beside that car, watching the elevator doors open, already looking for her. The Rolls-Royce Phantom was the color of the space between stars. Not black, something deeper and quieter than black. It sat at the lobby entrance with the still authority of a vehicle that had never once been informed of a space it couldn't occupy. Jang Tae-seok was standing beside the open door. Black suit precisely cut, architectural not merely tailored. No tie. One open button. The dark ring on his right hand, simple enough to be overlooked, impossible not to notice. When the elevator doors opened and he saw her, something moved in his expression, controlled but not entirely contained. He said nothing. He offered his arm. Chief Rowe and one other man in dark suits materialized at the lobby entrance with the calm efficiency of people who were always exactly where they needed to be before they were needed. They didn't look like security. They looked like outcomes. The drive took 15 minutes. They rode in silence, the kind that has weight and warmth and something unspoken turning slowly underneath it. Miami pressed itself against the tinted windows. The bay caught the last of the evening light and held it. The city did what Miami always does, which exists at a volume slightly larger than you remember. The Phantom stopped at the entrance of the Kimpton Epic. Reina looked through the glass. Valets moving in practiced arcs. Guests in black ties streaming through the lobby toward the rooftop elevators. Somewhere above her, a chair with her name on a card and a man who had placed it there believing it was a trap. She breathed. "Ready?" he asked. "No," she said. "Let's go anyway." The almost smile arrived. This time it stayed. The elevator opened onto the rooftop terrace and Miami detonated behind it. All towers and dark water and the city's absolute insistence on its own beauty regardless of who was watching. 350 guests. A string quartet performing something with more optimism than occasion required. White florals arranged with the ambition of people who have never once been told to scale back. They felt it before Reina and Tae-seok were fully through the doors. Not one person, a cascade. A couple near the entrance. Then the group by the bar. Then the cluster at the railing. Conversations didn't stop. They dropped mid-sentence and didn't find their way back. Reina walked onto that rooftop with Jang Tae-seok's hand resting at the small of her back, her gold thread catching the terrace lighting, and her head exactly where she had decided it would be when she stepped into the lobby at 5:51 that morning. Cross the terrace. 60 feet. Sterling Paige stood at the altar beside Cecily Hargrove, who was luminous in the way of women who have been quietly preparing for this specific moment since they were old enough to understand what evenings like this meant. Sterling adjusted his cufflink. He looked up. He saw her. The cufflink dropped. He caught it. His smile didn't disappear, it stiffened. The way a mask stiffens when the person behind it becomes suddenly, unexpectedly uncomfortable with their own performance. Chief Rowe, positioned near the elevator bank, watched the room reorient around the new arrival and said nothing. He never did. What happened in the next 3 hours was something no one at that wedding would stop talking about for the rest of that year. Reina did not make a scene. That was what Sterling Paige had not factored into his carefully assembled plan. He had built this entire evening around a specific version of her, the woman he had spent 4 years reducing, the woman who had left with a single bag and $31 in a joint account, the woman who, he was fairly certain, still heard his voice in her quieter moments telling her exactly what she was worth. He had arranged the chair, written the note, calculated the sightlines. He had gambled on her arriving as he had left her. The woman who sat down in the front row chair with her name on it was someone he did not recognize. She crossed her legs, accepted water from a passing server without breaking her composure, turned slightly to say something quiet to the man beside her, who nodded once, with the unhurried patience of a man accustomed to having time rather than chasing it. Chief Rowe and his counterpart had positioned themselves without instruction, and the section of the rooftop around the front row had quietly rearranged itself, the way air rearranges before a weather system arrives. The ceremony proceeded. Cecily was radiant. Her vows were composed and genuine, delivered with the full, unguarded belief of a woman who had not yet been given reason to doubt the man in front of her. She looked at Sterling the way people look at something they have chosen completely. Sterling looked at his vows. Then at Cecily. Then twice at the front row. Reina was watching the bay. It was Sterling who crossed the rooftop during cocktail hour. She had known he would. Men like Sterling cannot leave a narrative unresolved, particularly when they feel it moving away from them. He arrived beside her at the railing with a glass of scotch and the studied ease of a man performing a comfort he did not feel. "You actually came," he said. "You saved me a seat." He glanced at Tae-seok, 15 feet away, in quiet conversation with a man Reina didn't recognize but who was responding to him with the attentiveness of someone mid-negotiation. Sterling's jaw adjusted slightly. "Who is he?" "A friend." "A friend." His voice dropped lower. "Reina." What exactly do you think you're doing right now? Standing at a railing at your wedding. She looked at him directly, steadily. Congratulations, Sterling. She's lovely. She deserves someone who will actually mean it. Don't what? She tilted her head, genuinely curious. I'm exactly where you asked me to be. Something moved behind his eyes, anger first, and beneath the anger, something more honest than he intended to let through. The specific exposure of a man who set a trap, and is only now realizing he has been standing inside it all evening. You think walking in here with some... Sterling. Jang Tae-seok's voice arrived quietly beside them. He had not moved quickly. He had not raised his voice. He was simply present, the way a wall is simply present, and his dark eyes held Sterling's with the particular calm patience of someone who has never once needed urgency to make a point. Sterling looked at him, and something happened, visible to the two people nearest them at that moment. Sterling Paige, who had practiced confidence for so long it had become his default registered something in Jang Tae-seok's expression that he had no language for but understood in the oldest part of his nervous system. He stepped back. Half a step. Involuntary. Congratulations on your marriage, Jang Tae-seok said pleasantly. He rested one hand briefly at Reina's shoulder. Just a comma, just punctuation. Enjoy your evening. Sterling walked away. Across the rooftop, Cecily Hargrove watched her husband of 4 hours walk back from the direction of his ex-wife wearing an expression she had never seen on him before. She would think about that expression again at 2 o'clock in the morning 3 weeks later, when she picked up his phone to check the time and found a name she didn't recognize and a message that arrived the way these things always arrive, quietly and all at once. But that was later. Right now, Reina stood at the railing and waited for the feeling Sterling had installed in her over 4 years, that low, cold certainty that she was permanently less than enough, to surface. She waited. It didn't come. What came instead was something she hadn't planned for. Something that had nothing to do with Sterling Paige at all. They left before dinner was served. There was nothing left for her there. In the elevator going down, she exhaled. The kind of exhale that comes from somewhere structural, the release of something held so long you had stopped registering the weight of it. Are you all right? He asked. Yes. She considered it honestly for a moment. Actually, yes. Outside, the Miami night was warm and salt-laced and lit the way this city always managed to be lit, with a stubborn insistence that the world was more beautiful than it had any right to be at this hour. The Phantom waited. Chief Row waited. The city moved at its own frequency in every direction. She stopped on the sidewalk before getting in. I need to say something, she said. He waited. He was very good at waiting. I don't know who you actually are. She held his gaze. I know what you've told me. I know what I've observed. The men who are always nearby. The way rooms respond to you before you've said a word. The phone call you took on the third morning that made your voice go completely flat for 30 seconds before it came back. She paused. I'm not asking you to explain anything. I just want you to know I'm paying attention. He looked at her for a long, still moment. Good, he said. Just that. They drove back through the city in the same silence as before. Full, warm, and carrying something underneath it that neither of them had named yet. Miami slid past the darkened windows. The bay glittered. The towers threw their light against the sky with the total confidence of a city that has never once entertained the possibility of going unnoticed. She was home by 11. Noah was asleep. She stood in her kitchen in her gold thread and her emerald gown and looked at the counter where the invitation had lived for 5 days. It wasn't there. She had thrown it away that morning. But she had read it one final time before she did. And she had understood, finally and completely, what Sterling had intended when he wrote that handwritten note, and what he had actually delivered. He wanted her to come and feel small. She had come and discovered she was free. The following morning, she sent proposals to 3 hotel concierges she had been too afraid to contact for 2 years. She emailed a full lookbook to a restaurant group in the design district. She sat at her kitchen table with Noah eating cereal beside her, opened a new business registration tab, and typed the name she had been holding in her head for months without writing it down, as if writing it made it real, and real things could be broken. Reina's Dessert Studio. She hit submit. Jang Tae-seok called that afternoon. My mother would like to discuss a standing arrangement, he said. Quarterly dinners. A brief pause, and inside that pause she heard the outline of something he was keeping measured. She also said to tell you that the installation was the most extraordinary dessert she has seen in 60 years of living, and that she intends to remain 58 indefinitely if it means you will be there for all of them. Reina laughed, real full, arriving without warning, the kind she had forgotten she owned. Tell her I'll consider it. She looked out the window at the Overtown street below. The familiar walls. The neighborhood was still pulling itself back together one block at a time, not because anyone was watching but because it had decided to. And tell her 58 looks extraordinary on her. After she hung up, she opened her sketchbook to a clean page. And she began to draw. Sterling Paige married Cecily Hargrove on a Saturday in October with 350 witnesses, and an optimistic rooftop view of Biscayne Bay. By January, Cecily had retained counsel. By February, the filing was complete. Sterling spent the following year discovering that a man who performs love eventually exhausts every audience willing to stay for the second act. Reina spent that year building. The hotel proposals became contracts. The restaurant group became a quarterly residency with a standing credit on their dinner menus. By spring she had a commissary kitchen in Wynwood, a part-time assistant named Dorinda who had strong opinions about buttercream and was right about all of them, and an order calendar that finally, for the first time, felt like proof rather than hope. Jang Tae-seok flew back from Seoul in March for reasons he explained without over-explaining. He arrived at her apartment with Korean pears from a market she had never heard of and a single question he asked so quietly she leaned slightly forward to hear it. She made tea. They talked until the city outside went from lit to dark to lit again. The bay doing what the bay always does, carrying everything in both directions at once. At 10 o'clock, Noah appeared in the kitchen doorway in his pajamas. He assessed the situation with the complete and unsentimental thoroughness of a 6-year-old who trusts his own instincts entirely. He looked at Jang Tae-seok. He looked at his mother. He looked at the Korean pears on the counter. "Are you staying for breakfast?" he asked Tae-seok. Tae-seok looked at Reina. Reina looked at her son. "We'll see," she said. But she was smiling, the full kind all the way up, the kind she'd had before everything and had now, slowly and entirely on her own terms, found her way back to. She had gone to that rooftop to confirm she was free. She had come home knowing something more than that. She was not starting over. She was arriving, built by her own hands, 4:47 morning at a time. If Reina's story moved something in you, if any part of a woman who got back up when everything expected her to stay down landed somewhere real, please like this video right now and subscribe to this channel so you never miss a story. New stories drop every week. Every single one is about what happens when the people who were written off refuse to write themselves out. And I want to know in the comments, what would you have done with that invitation? Would you have stayed home? Would you have gone? Would you have walked in wearing gold thread you stitched yourself, beside someone who made the whole room go quiet? Tell me below. I read every single one.